Well, today marks the 9th day of testimony in the first-degree murder trial of Braulio Castillo outside Washington, D.C. He's accused of killing his wife, Michelle, back in March of 2014, when her body was found hanged in a basement bathroom in her home. Investigators say Mr. Castillo entered the home, killed her, and then staged a scene to make it look like a suicide. Witness testimony today includes a forensics detective. He is bringing to light phone records that prosecutors say show Mr. Castillo was trying to create an alibi. So, advantage prosecution or defense here? Fred Tisi is a former federal prosecutor. David Pietro, a former prosecutor as well. Fred, the only thing that the prosecution has to go on here is circumstantial evidence. How strong would you say is this case?
Well, John, I think it's a decent case. I mean, look, I love it when defense lawyers say, all there is circumstantial evidence. I mean, I used to love to tell juries that, 4 hunters could be out hunting and they see an animal go by, and one says it's a horse, one says it's an elk, one says it's a deer. That's a direct testimony. And when you go and look at the tracks, you see exactly what kind of animal it was. That's the circumstantial evidence. There's good circumstantial evidence here. A cadaver dog kind of hit on the rug at the base of the bed. The children's testimony, I think, is very damning, that the father asked him for the alarm codes. And so, it's not the easiest case in the world, but I think it's a case that the Commonwealth can get a conviction. But there wasn't any of his DNA found in her house. Wouldn't there be some if there had been this big struggle, David?
You would think so, because according to the detectives, Michelle was asphyxiated probably by a pillow as well as strangled by a cord. So you would think with this struggle and with Mr. Castillo having a black eye, there would be some sort of DNA underneath her fingerprints, and not to mention, what about his cell phone records? If he was actually on the scene, did the detectives check to see if the cell phone towers in the area, they will ping him in that direct location? I think the prosecution has two cases they need to prove. They need to disprove she committed suicide and actually prove that Mr. Castillo is the assailant and the one that committed the homicide in this case. But
Fred, as you mentioned, the children here have been testifying against their father. One of them said that he saw his father in his brother's bedroom one night, right. and that brother, whose bedroom it was, said, yeah, my dad was asking me for my mom's alarm codes because they were estranged. She was living in a separate place. He wanted the alarm codes and offered me a gold coin if I would give them to him.
Correct. I mean, what you see from David is exactly what defense lawyers do, and what they're supposed to do is he's trying to get you to look at over here of all these things that they don't have, and then that's exactly his job and the job of defense lawyers. But the job of the prosecution is to kind of try to bring the jury back to what they do have, which are some of the things that you just hit. That one brother saw the father in the house that night. This whole thing about the alarm codes, and interestingly, John, the one son testified that he woke up, his mother usually wakes them up, she wasn't there, he goes upstairs, her door to her bedroom is locked, he has to pick the lock, go into her room, the shower's running. Now, why would someone who's committing suicide turn her shower on, lock her bedroom door, and then go commit suicide in the basement? I mean, it was clearly done to kind of throw the kids off the path and to kind of buy time. I mean, I think, there's a lot of things there that point to this guy. Yeah, do I wish there was DNA? Certainly. But, you can't file a motion to change the facts. The facts are what they give you.
We'll see where that case goes. Again, testimony still underway. I want to switch gears and talk about that horrible accident at the Cincinnati Zoo, the fatal shooting of an endangered gorilla. An Ohio prosecutor says he will announce on Monday whether he will pursue charges against the parents of the toddler who fell into that gorilla's enclosure. Of course, once that happened, the zoo felt it had no option except to kill that gorilla. David, if you were the prosecutor in this case, would you bring charges?
No way. If anyone knows, a 3-year-old can get away from their parents and they're rambunctious and things can happen. For the prosecutor to actually consider this case when his own police department has no interest in seeking criminal charges, it seems politically motivated, in my opinion. Everyone knows that children can, when they're at a zoo, they're rambunctious, they're moving around, they're doing different things. the prosecution would have to prove that the parents intentionally allowed the child to go into that area to fall into the cage, or that the parents were so grossly reckless that in their supervision of their children at a zoo that it would warrant criminal charges. There's no likelihood of conviction, and the prosecutor should totally disregard his investigation in this case and move on. Actually, the parents are the ones that have a civil lawsuit against the zoo for allowing this child to fall into this water area and having a gorilla pull the child up and down this lake. If you look at the video, it's pretty dramatic. There's zero chance of a criminal prosecution in this case, and the prosecutor should really move on.
Let me try an analogy, Fred, and see if it's not too tortured. But if a couple, lets their 3-year-old run out in front of my car, and I swerve and hit somebody else head on and kill them, wouldn't they bear some culpability in that circumstance? How would that be different from this?
Well, they may. I mean, again, it gets back to the standard that David used, and all of which I agree with him right up until the part where he talked about the parents wanting to sue the zoo. That's where you kind of lost me. But getting back to your hypo, the answer is if the parents were negligent, which is a legal term for reckless or weren't paying any attention, or if this kid had run out before and they knew about it, the answer is yeah, that could be a contributing factor because it's reasonably foreseeable that a driver like you would swerve. And unfortunately, sometimes into oncoming traffic. So, under your hypothetical, yes, but in this instance, the question is whether or not it was reasonably foreseeable if a parent in a large group in a zoo setting, which are kind of loud and boisterous. I mean, it's we've raised 4 sons. I mean, it's hard taking them to places like the zoo and kind of keeping track of them. You're like an air traffic controller. Where'd they go? What are they doing? So I agree with David. I don't see a criminal prosecution, and quite frankly, I don't see a case against the zoo either. I mean, the zoo complied with all applicable regulations and rules regarding enclosure of the gorilla cage, and so, I'm not sure where that goes.
After something so terrible happens, people feel like somebody should pay, and perhaps there isn't anybody in this case. We'll
guess
see.
What? Every once in a while, there's just an accident. It's an accident. It's nobody's fault. It was an accident, and it's a shame that gorilla had to get shot, but you're talking about an animal that can crush a raw coconut in its hand.
All right. Fred, TC, David, Pietro. Good discussion. Thank you both.
Thanks for having me. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.